Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming out tonight. My name is Jeff Barrett. I am the chair of the County Commissioners. We are joined by Ben Nelson, the vice chair, and George Hebert, our secretary, also commissioner, and Derek Ferlin, who I'll turn it over to in a minute. We really appreciate the opportunity to come out and talk about the need and the benefits of putting sober housing together in Claremont. We have found that it's really the missing piece of the puzzle. We've kind of got from the judicial system through the incarceration process, through the treatment process, pretty well covered, into aftercare. What we're missing is safe and sober housing, so that is what we're really trying to accomplish here. We've got a panel of people who are invested in this process here to answer questions, and we certainly want all the feedback we can. Some of you will remember that we did this probably a year ago with a different proposed site, and we took the feedback and really retooled based on the comments of the public, because we really believe in this process. So tonight is phase 2, and with that I will turn it over to Derek, and he'll introduce the panel. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
There's always one.
Good idea to turn the lights be so.
I don't have to worry about that.
So that's the reminder to please silence all electronic devices. All right, so thanks, Commissioner Barrett. So I'm Derek Ferlin, I'm the county manager. So just so you guys know the setup for tonight, we've got about 10 people here live in the audience. At the Tech Center, we're broadcasting live on Facebook on the What's Up Claremont page, and I understand there's 30 or so at last time I checked, and we're also being broadcast live on Channel 8, so we're trying to reach as much of the community as possible. So tonight we're going to have a chance to hear some different perspectives. That's what the panelists that we brought in, different looks at what this issue does and the community impact that it has, and so just be able to hear from them rather than from the county experts. We've maintained all along that this project's going to have a positive community benefit, and so hearing from them, I think, will maybe tell that story a little bit more effectively than hearing from the county officials. We will have a chance to ask questions and have those questions answered. So we're going to try to give the panelists a few minutes to share their experiences, why they think this project is important, and then once we get through that, we'll be able to take questions here from the live audience, and we're hoping from the Facebook community. And we have somebody that'll be moderating the feedback, and we'll relay those questions to the group. And so we hope for a healthy, robust, interactive discussion tonight. So before we turn it over to Superintendent Barry, one of the things that we've really, last time we talked about it was all about the project and the details and how many beds and how it's going to work. And I really wanted to speak more about the community impact. The more we thought about this project and what it will offer, there's really for every person going through recovery, there's at least 5 other people that will be impacted positively from their continued sobriety. So if you have a person that's going through recovery, they've got 2 parents, on average they have 2 kids, and then beside them is a significant other or a spouse that's having to go along that journey with them. So that's where we get the 5-to-1 number. Obviously with extended family and friends, that number could be quite much larger than that, obviously. So for a person who makes the decision that they want to get clean and sober and maintain that sobriety, there are multiple lives in our community that will benefit from that experience. And so that's partially why we invited the people that we have tonight. We do have a couple of parents who's had a child go through the recovery experience. We've got a couple of gentlemen that actually run sober houses. I know last time there were a lot of questions about what happens during this or what happens with that. Well, they can answer those questions because that's what they do for a living. We've got a few people here who have been through the Trails program and graduated and are doing some really good things in our community, and they can share their experience. We have a statement from an employer, because that's another piece of this. There's an economic development piece to this. It's the one thing our employers in this community need are more people that want to work. And once you get these folks sober and willing to make some lifestyle changes, then they become a really good source of human capital for our local businesses so that they can expand and grow. So we're hoping to have some people that looks like they might be a little bit late, but otherwise we do have one letter from from Preferred Building Systems, Brian Huot, that we will read and share with you. So, Dave, I'll turn it over to you, and then you can introduce our panelists, and we'll get going.
Thank you all for coming. I'm not an MC, so I don't know how well I'm going to do with this, but our panel tonight, I'm going to start off with our parents. We have Michelle Pierce, and we have Kathy Colburn and her husband Mike. Under experts, we have Andrew West from Bonfire Recovery. He has facilities in Dover, in Rochester. Ryan Gagney, facilities in Manchester, Concord, Keene, and soon to be Swansea. Whitney Davis, one of the clinicians from the Department of Corrections. Rachel D'Agostino, current Trails participant, currently on work release. Don McGee, the Programs Director at the Department of Corrections. And Tyler Berry, one of our young men who has completed Trails. Also, what I'll say about Tyler is Tyler was not sentenced to Trails. He asked for Trails and treatment. He has graduated from the program and is currently on work release. I'm going to start off with a letter after I break this light, from Brian Huot. This summer we did a woodworking program, partnered here with the Sugar River Tech, went extremely well. It was a first run. We have never brought our offender population outside into a school to participate in the program. The program was held here, went extremely well. We built picnic tables for Arrowhead. We renovated some of the wooden structures at the front of the daycare. We renovated some of the wooden structures inside of the daycare center here on site. In our final project, we built a gazebo for the nursing home residents up at the county home. So we have this great gazebo that our nursing home residents can enjoy the outside courtyard area of the DOC. Tyler was one of those folks that participated in the program. He was in it from start to finish, and it went really, really well. Brian Huot at PBS was a partner with us in that. We would have not been able to accomplish what we did without his help. Brian helped to transport it in two pieces. Brian's team helped assemble it and level it at the DOC and get it on site. Huge piece of the puzzle. Brian saw the effort of our men and women who participated in this program, and he has hired one of our men, and that is Tyler. Tyler, just give me a hand. So Tyler's done an excellent job. He's going to work every day, and he's doing an outstanding job. So Brian's letter reads, "To whom it may concern, we have worked with the Sullivan County Department of Corrections Center, specifically the Trails program, since the fall of 2017. As a resource of employment, since becoming involved, we had multiple program participants employed at our company. The Trails program is Transitional Reentry and Inmate Life Skills program for residents of Sullivan County, and it allows community-minded organizations to be involved and show support of our local community. Our interactions with the staff within the program at the Sullivan County Department of Corrections, we have witnessed the utmost professionalism and appreciation, and we have seen firsthand proactive leadership role that helps our community and the individuals within have a path for renewed hope. We have been pleased not only to provide a work environment for those Trails program participants to continue to develop their skills and talents within the construction environment while in the program, but we have also been able to offer full-time jobs to several participants after completion of the program." Again, Tyler is not the first. We have had other men participate and get hired. As an employer participant for over 2 years and working with the county, we believe the direction of our county commissioners, manager, and Department of Corrections are taking. We have witnessed the good that can come from a well-executed support programs and believe the value of the community to participate and be part of the solution. A transitional house is the next piece of the puzzle to help ensure that the individuals within the program at the Department of Corrections Center can be given the necessary support and become integrated into our communities once again in a positive way. The community has our overwhelming support of this project, and we look forward to witnessing how it will continue to help build and strengthen our community. So, again, part of the reason Claremont was attractive for us is we currently have 88 employers within the city limits of Claremont who hire our folks. Our next closest town, Newport, we have 21 employers. So we do keep track of that. We tally where our men and women are going out to work, and this is a community that has welcomed our population, supported our population, and continues to hire those men and women. I think we're going to start with our parents. I think our parents will tell you their stories, tell you about the need for sober housing in this community. Kathy? Kathy Coburn.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me come here and talk. I really appreciate it. It's funny how life works. The irony is that when my de facto daughter-in-law, Sarah, the mother of my two beautiful granddaughters, was slated to be discharged from the Sullivan County Department of Corrections jail, I lobbied hard to take her away from Sullivan County. I had to because there was nowhere for her to go. My beloved daughter-in-law entered the Sullivan County Jail a broken young woman who was addicted to bath salts, which are like methamphetamines, ecstasy, and cocaine combined. She'd been to rehab many times but relapsed and was racked with shame and self-loathing. After losing guardianship of both her daughters, and worse, when she was not able to have any contact with her youngest little daughter, she simply gave up. She said her daughters were better off without her. She didn't care if she lived or if she died. We are indebted to Sullivan County. Getting arrested and being sent to Sullivan County Jail saved her life. Being incarcerated at Sullivan County Jail meant Sarah became addiction-free. She was placed in their substance misuse program, Trails, and it was there at Sullivan County Jail Sarah began to believe what the captain, Captain Brookins, told her, along with the Trails staff. Sarah, your life is worth saving. You are worth saving. We believe in you. They told her that her daughters needed her and that she needed them. And for the first time in a long, long time, with hope, Sarah began to fight to live and for recovery. Never before would I have imagined in a million years that I would have ever done this, but I wrote a thank you note to the good captain, the superintendent, and the New Hampshire commissioner. I thanked a jail for saving Sarah's life. But one of the most dangerous times for relapse to occur is just after recovery is achieved, unless they have a place to live, unless they continue with recovery support. So despite our indebtedness to Sullivan County Department of Corrections, I lobbied hard to get her released somewhere else, where she could receive the services of sober housing and continue her hard work of putting her life back together. So one can imagine that when release was on the horizon, with no recovery program she could afford or access in Sullivan County, and with no family at the time able to risk her living with them, I was frantic. Without recovery or residential options, Sarah would be released to a homeless shelter, which is tantamount to being released to the streets. She'd be indeed homeless, penniless, fragile, and almost certain to relapse and die. Sarah was lucky. I found a place across the state in Somersworth. This entailed hours and days, then weeks of work on both the part of Sullivan County and I. The program is a year-long residential program that is rooted in hope, skills, connections, with their mission to put back the broken pieces, teach life skills, and reconnect mothers like Sarah with their cherished children. That's what Sullivan County Department of Corrections is proposing. Sober housing where Sullivan County can offer the Sarahs in your community a chance at making it once released from jail. Sober housing will save lives, change lives, and not just the lives of men and women in recovery, but their children's lives. And I don't think I can overstate how much losing her children and worse contact destroyed all but an ounce of will for Sarah to live. Sober housing gives parents a true chance, and when Sullivan County gives people that chance, you give the entire community the immeasurable gifts of hope, possibilities, a future. You give your community the chance to impact homelessness here for its families to not only thrive in the near future, but for future generations. Let's face it, the scourge of bath salt addiction, heroin, cocaine, translates into crime and money, so much money, because who pays for the families of these parents who are in the jaws of addiction? You. Who pays for the cost of incarceration? Us. And who pays for the effects on children who are left parentless? All of us. All I know is this. Oh, and I know is this. Without sober housing, the next Sarah may be released, addiction-free, but homeless, resourceless, and alone. Maybe the next Sarah will make it, but all we need look is in the alleyways, on the streets, or at the numbers of those in the county morgue to see the risk. And money spent after the great expense of incarceration down the drain. One day, I hope in my lifetime, medicine catches up to the science of addiction. But until then, sober housing is practical and doable. I think when Sullivan County offers this sober housing, a lot more parents, maybe even children, will be writing thank you letters to Sullivan Department of Corrections, because crime will be reduced, families reunited, and because instead of the overwhelming number of people in the throes of addiction and all it causes, there will be a whole new population sustaining recovery and even giving back to this fine community. In fact, that is Sarah's goal. She's going to come back here upon her completion of her program and walk through the jail's doors without them locking behind her and tell her story so that just like her life was saved, she can help to save lives of the other Sarahs. The simple truth is that every citizen in Sullivan County deserves what sober housing can offer your community. Safer streets, hope, recovery, possibility, saving families, and saving lives. When I told Sarah I was going to do this, she said, "Can I write something?" She said she'd be here if she could. So instead, I'm reading this. And she said I could use her whole name. Hello, my name is Sarah Howard. I'm a former resident of Sullivan County, and more importantly, of the Sullivan County Department of Corrections. Only recently have I been able to get out of the endless cycle of incarceration, addiction, and homelessness. I lost myself on the streets of Claremont to bath salts, which is currently wreaking havoc in this community. I felt hopeless, and without the proper supports, I was hopeless. I went in and out of the Department of Corrections for the better part of 3 years, doing the Trails program each time. They do their best to facilitate recovery supports upon leaving, but there is only so much they can do when there are no safe places to go, when someone has no family or healthy supports to go to. Being someone who lived in the community and having bath salt nearly take my life at least twice in a matter of months, I understand the importance and need for a supportive transitional environment for people to go when being released from incarceration. Instead, most people go right back to what they know and end up either incarcerated again or worse, dead. I'm currently at Lydia's House of Hope in Somersworth, which has changed my life. It's a year-long transitional program for women to get their lives back. Without this place, I would be still running the streets of Claremont, in prison, or dead. The need for a sober living community in this area is immense. Many of the residents here want a different life, but have no way or idea how to get there. Having a transitional facility could change this community for the better. The Department of Corrections has been instrumental in getting me to where I am today. They are invested in changing the lives of all the people who come through their doors. What they are proposing for this community would only help the ongoing problem, and it is only getting worse as the days, weeks, and months and years go by. Thank you.
Michelle Pierce.
Good evening. Some of you know me from being on the school board. Some of you know me from running around town with a bunch of little kids watering flowers. Some of you know me decorating Christmas trees, lots of little kids. My story starts out with us moving here 22 years ago, and my daughter entered Stevens High School. And right off the bat, we were in trouble with the law. And it didn't end there. Her junior year, she went to a program up in Benning, Vermont, where she lived in a canvas tent with other children, other women, other girls her age, learning how to get along. She came back out, she was doing great, she graduated Stevens High School. Couldn't have been a prouder woman. Thought my daughter was clean. Then she moved to Maine, and she proceeded to do it again. She took a habit that nobody understands unless they're there. Something that we cannot fathom, watching our children die in front of us, little by little, time by time. On her second round, she met a boy in what they call drug court, and it was a great program. And I went towards the end of it, and I asked the counselor, did she mention all of the things that have gone on? Or did she just mention what is relevant? And after a half an hour conversation with me, we found out that she hadn't mentioned half of what she needed to help get her sober. So again, we were perplexed. Would she come out of this program graduating and going right back to drugs? Well, something interfered that. A little boy named Deegan. My grandson Deegan was born January 11th, 2011. January 10th, excuse me. And when he was born, there was this great hope in my life that my daughter had finally become clean. But yet again, it happened. The drugs were more important than the child. I ended up bringing Deegan back here at 1.5 years old and taking custody of him through the courts in Claremont, which I am gratefully indebted to for the rest of my life. They saved my grandson. I had nothing. I was a grandparent with nothing. No diapers, no crib, no anything, and I had just had a double knee replacement 6 months before. It was a challenge. But we made it because we have a community here in Claremont that's amazing. There were people that came out that were recovered drug addicts themselves and said, here, we can help you with this. There were programs that came out and said, here, come with us. There were counselors that came to my house. There were people that came and saw Deegan. There were people who brought us things so that he had toys and books. It was phenomenal, and it's why I gave back to my community for the last 15 years. Every time he saw us out, it was me trying to give back to our community for all of the things that our community gave to us, a struggling grandparent with a child. So we're on our second round. My daughter's into it pretty bad, and this time it comes down. It comes down to the wire. We have a meeting 4 years ago. She's sitting there with bandages around her arm. She has a staph septic infection in her blood. If she does not continue the routine of going into the emergency room and getting treatment, she will die. In the process, I asked her the one question that no parent wants to ask a child or have to do. Where do you want to be buried? And how? Well, I want to be buried next to my father, and I want to be buried and not cremated. I said, well, I'm sorry. I can do the cremation, and I can put you in a box next to your father. But as of today, I have to walk away and consider you not alive anymore. And 4 years ago, I walked away. And she faltered even further, to the point where the law stepped in and said, we've had enough. And she spent 3 years in prison. Those 3 years in prison were really rough on me, too. There's no contact for Deegan. I had an angry little boy. Where's my mother? Why can't I have my mother? I just kept saying, your mom's getting better. You'll see her soon. We never discussed what was going on. However, we went to counseling every Monday for 4 years. And then my daughter called me, finally, from jail. And I answered the phone, and I accepted the phone call. No one will talk to me. You're the only one left. Mom, I think I can do it this time. Okay. At this point, as a parent or a grandparent, you become numb to things. You just don't know if you were going to ever believe this child ever again. And then it happened. She got out of jail, prison, and she went to a halfway house in Portland, Maine. And there's about, I believe, 60 of those in Portland alone, which is wonderful, because those people coming out of those prisons can go directly into these homes. My daughter is not here tonight. She was going to be, but unfortunately, she had a job, and her job would not let her be. So she apologizes for that. So she's in that sober house. And when you start in a sober house, you start at the bottom, and you have to work your way up. And eventually, you become the president of the sober house. That means you've become clean and sober for a year. That means that you are championing to get all of those other people ready to go and helping them up through. You become their leader. And then when you graduate or move out, the next person becomes the leader. But the community is also there. The community is also there to help. The community is there. Just like I'd like to point out, the community is here. The Union Block has several wonderful programs. Remix, a place you can go and sit down and not have to feel like you could go and drink coffee and have conversations and feel like you're going out and socializing. The church that helps in the corner, and the wonderful center for addiction that's on that side. A mere walk across the street for this housing project, which is amazing, because if you put them out in the middle of the woods, none of them have cars. They don't have money for taxis. So they start walking, and then they start running into the same people again. Those people. Our people. They're all our people. We're a community together. Regardless of what anybody says, they're still part of our community. So now we're at the sober house. What do you think happens next, guys? She made it. My daughter is 32 years old. She now has custody of my grandson back as of August 20th of last year. And she is doing phenomenal. She is learning how to be a parent for the first time. I also have another grandson who's younger. He's with his dad, but they all live in the same area, so they get to visit each other and spend time. But that doesn't mean that she couldn't slip again. That doesn't mean that I would have to race up to Maine again and get my grandson and put him back in the car and bring him back again with nothing and start over. Because that's what happens when you are in a family with a drug addict. You're constantly starting over. Every time. It's hard. It's sad. But it can be rejoiceful when it comes to the other side. When you're in the community and you see someone walking across the street and they're getting sober and they're whistling away and they're happy, you be happy for them. Be happy. Be happy that those people are trying, because so many don't. The statistics in Claremont are quite interesting from a program that we did quite a few years ago, where they averaged out that probably close to 49% of Claremont were grandparents or aunts and uncles raising their grandchildren, or nephews and nieces, or single parents. So there's a lot here to change, but there's a lot here that's changed in the 22 years I've been here. the healthiness of this town is becoming apparent more and more every day. When you take the time to understand that addiction could be anybody at any time, anywhere, and any one of you or anyone in the audience or anyone that's listening can be affected by that. Whether you're a first party, a second party, or a third party, you can be affected, and you will. You will see people and say, I know that kid. Wow, he's a mess. What could I do? What could I say? Where can I get him to go? All it takes is one person, and I've been doing that for 10 years on Walnut Street, spending lots of time with kids when their parents were having problems or struggling themselves. It doesn't take much to stand up and say, this is worth it. It's harder to tell you my story because a lot of us are ashamed or embarrassed or saddened or feel that we are the ones that are at fault because we're the parent. How did this happen? But we're not, because they're making choices, they're adults for the most part. This building is across the street from an entire corner of help. Consider that when you consider thinking about this and how important it is for every single person in this community to be able to have every facet of that diamond. Because every little rough stone that's turned into a diamond has facets, correct? And this is the facet that needs to be here for every one of those little stones that will turn into diamonds. I thank you for my time here, and I thank you for listening. My daughter regrets not being here. She said that it saved her life. I said it saved her life. Thank heavens. So today, I'm proud to be here to explain my story. I'm not embarrassed. I don't feel bad. I feel encouraged. I feel proud. I feel fantastic, actually, that I get to have my grandson on February 13th for a whole 10 days. Yeah, it's great. That never would have happened with a drug if she'd been into drugs. Doesn't mean it's not gonna happen again. There's always that back burner. But the positivity is what keeps us together. Not the negative, the positive. When she calls me on a Sunday night and they have the family meeting and they're all yelling and I tell them, okay, you need to be quiet. First of all, I raised both of you, technically. So you gotta learn how to be a parent and you gotta learn how to let her be your mom instead of acting like your brother and sister. So there's so many dynamics right there that change everything and have to be learned over or redone. Having this house gives those folks the chance to walk out of that building feeling fantastic and okay. And it'll be the only thing that'll save them. Thank you for your time.
Tell us your story.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name's Andrew West. Dave, thanks for asking me to be here. It's a pleasure. So I am on the, also on the chair for the state, New Hampshire Coalition of Recovery Residences. So I'm the co-chairperson of the board. I am the executive director of Bonfire, which is down in Dover. And then my real day job, I work for a residential detox and residential inpatient provider out of Massachusetts, helping persons with substance use disorders. So I have a pretty good amount of experience working with folks and excuse me, sort of seeing where people are falling through the cracks these days. So I appreciate being asked to be up here. A lot of the substances are starting to change. That's kind of how it works with drug and alcohol use disorders. You know, a few years before we started Bonfire down in Dover, it wasn't all over the news. There wasn't funding. There weren't grants available. We saw folks coming out of Stratford County, out of the jail, and they had nowhere to go. And we said, you know, I'm a person in long-term recovery. What that looks like for me is I haven't found it necessary to use drugs or alcohol, and in March it'll be 14 years. And, you know, so we saw these men and women coming out of the jail, and they had nowhere to go. You know, not a lot of services where we are, and I've never really been someone to kind of wait around for other people to do something, or waiting for the state kind of to come in and do something. So morally, ethically, I said, you know, we can do something here. I know how we can help out, and we did it. And it was really, it was a group of us, people in long-term recovery, and everybody banded together, and it was great. We were lucky enough, Dave walked us through the property. The layout's different, but square footage-wise, a lot of the, you know, some of the maybe the numbers of folks perhaps who will be going in there are very similar to what we were able to do in Dover, and it has been fantastic over the years. It's set up right downtown, so I'll speak about Bonfire, right? So we're right downtown in Dover, New Hampshire. We are about 2 blocks from the local recovery community organization. We're near public transportation. Dover has, Stratford County, Seacoast, we have, it's about, in effect, a 2.7% or sub, I think it's 1.7 now % unemployment rate. So people are coming out, and we're giving them, we're not giving them a handout, right? We're helping them get back on their feet, learn to fend for themselves, getting them back out. They're becoming productive members of society. They can focus on their, you know, their recovery. Of course, that comes first. And at the end of the day, I've just seen the Dover House, we've probably had 700 men pass through over the years, you know. A lot of these guys have gone on to start their own companies, construction companies, finish work. We had at one point a guy, he was the youngest master plumber in the state of New Hampshire. He's actually from, you know, I won't say his name, he's actually from this area, and he's doing fantastic. Multiple years in recovery, was not able to do it on his own. He just needed to be in a group of with a group of like-minded persons, kind of, you know, navigating, getting well, and all this cool stuff happened as a result of it. These guys and now gals, we also have a women's house, they're raising families, they're buying homes. As I said, they're becoming employers as well, which is fantastic. It really is. And I think it's great. It sounds like they've done a ton of legwork in terms of working with some of the local companies, because at the end of the day, right, there's just, the labor market's so tight right now, it's tough to find folks to come work. So employers are willing to invest in folks to get them to work, and that's really, at the end of the day, that's what, it's not all about working, but that's a huge part of it. You know, that validation that comes with going, folks earning their own way and becoming, again, transitioning back into society, if you will. 72 hours post-discharge from treatment or from incarceration are when folks are most likely to die from an overdose death, right? So a large part of this as well is, frankly, hopelessness. You know, people coming out of programs, coming out of the jails, coming out of the prisons, they have nowhere to go. And again, I like to be able to advocate and talk to folks maybe how, explaining at the end of the day how this is actually going to save the county money. It's going to save the local taxpayers money, which is fantastic. It's going to improve the tax rolls. I've seen it. I've seen property taxes for abutting properties and also in other areas go up, which is a good thing. Other people, oh, they're fixing up that building? That's great. Somebody else comes in, wants to develop some of the other, I think it was Union Block. And again, I'm not from here, and I'm not going to pretend like I know the area. But I can tell you from being outside and just being an objective voice, people will do that. They'll come in and they'll invest funding and money into properties, multifamilies. So, you know, there's the human component, which I could stand up here and speak to all day, and sometimes at these types of meetings, I like to talk about the fiscal side of it as well. People want to hear about that. You know, as I said, we've had about 800 guys through that building. I've never had an overdose death in all the years. We've never had, you know, the local houses broken into. We haven't had any type of fist fights over the years. It's been pretty incredible. And a lot of it is largely, it's peer driven. At certain points, we've had staff. At certain points, it's just been the men who are, again, all kind of walking that same path, looking out for each other, kind of keeping each other in line. And when you have that and it's well run, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. You get folks in there who are managing it, and they're running a tight ship. It's going to be fantastic for the community, absolutely fantastic. And you'll have other support services come in. And anyway, I'm super grateful to be here. We need more housing. The company I work for, it's rather large. It's based, it's about 100, 150 miles from here. And the biggest thing is folks can get into treatment, but then there's a huge bottleneck in terms of where they go afterward. You know, there just aren't enough places, and there's kind of the old adage that I like. It's when, you nurse a sick plant back to health, right? You pick it up out of that soil, you transfer it into healthy soil, you nourish it back, you make sure it's getting the nutrients, the water, the sunlight. You bring it back, you don't then uproot it and put it back in the toxic soil, right? So it's that same idea, that same mindset, that if you guys do that and are able to get the house open, it's going to be fantastic for the community. And again, I have no, I'd like to think of myself as being super objective. There's nothing locally here that's going to benefit me, nothing financially. I can just tell you and share from my own experience what I've seen it do in other towns, and I think being able to engage in dialogue with folks in the community, get people on board and say, hey, here's the benefits, and kind of letting them talk about it. We live in kind of a society today where everybody just wants to talk over other people. But if and this is great that you guys are doing this, bringing in the local community and letting you guys have a voice is fantastic. So I'm gonna share the time here, but really interested to hear any questions that you guys might have afterward. I'm gonna try to stick around and see what I can answer. So thanks a lot.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ryan Gagney, and thank you for having us out. When I had gotten the message to come out, I really tried to make it work. I have a little guy at home, and we're trying to play babysitter swap between my wife and I. So we really tried to make the effort to figure it out, because when I looked over to her and I said, is it okay for me to get out there and to go to the meeting? It's about an hour and a half for me to get out here. She knows how important it is, because I'm also somebody that's been in long-term recovery myself. March 7th of 2008, a correctional officer or a probation officer actually saved my life. And I was somebody that was part of a upper middle class family, and found myself through surgeries addicted to opiates, and later on was on heroin, and started to find myself tripping in and out of the correctional facilities. And had I not had that person intervene and actually tried to do something different with me, I would have spent the next following 5 years in Concord State Prison. And looking back, in that moment, I was in such a desperate place that seemed like a good option for me. And that's just kind of where I was in that current moment. And that probation officer saw something different, forced me into treatment for the umpteenth time, and my life has been forever changed. My wife knows it's important to me because my wife and I dated in high school. She got a good idea that things weren't quite right, and she left me. She's a lot smarter than I am. And so she left me, and years later, we reconnected. Shortly afterward, we got engaged, had some trouble, had a baby through IVF, and she only knows me now. She can't even remember the person that I used to be. And that start for me doesn't happen if I never had that serendipitous moment with a probation officer that was thinking outside the box. He wasn't just trying to stick me back inside of a cell. He was actually trying to help me to change my life, and so that I could stop impacting the direct community. And I think the important portion to let you know also, I'm the executive director of a national company, substance abuse company. We operate in 8 locations across the United States. We have a 42 residential program right in Concord that also has housing in Manchester as well. I also operate a low-cost sober living that operates in Keene, New Hampshire, as well as Manchester, New Hampshire. This has been my life. I've worked in substance abuse now for the better part of probably, including time volunteered, would be close to 11 years. And I've done everything that you can possibly do in substance abuse as far as just in any type of treatment atmosphere. I currently, right now, I manage a clinical team. They allowed me to. There's 4 amazing licensed clinicians, a medical doctor, a full-time psychiatric nurse practitioner, a variety of close to 15 to 20 tech staff, case managers, so on and so forth. And then I also have the sober living side that I've been a part of for the last 4 years, in direct care that I've owned. And I've watched personally the impact that this has had, not only through my own life as far as going to long-term treatment and actually having the separation and having a place to go that was attached to Stratford County up in Stratford or Dover, New Hampshire, and they had a halfway house that was loosely connected to the facilities there. And I stayed in that facility for their 90-day inpatient program, and then I went on to they had a year-long halfway house. And that was where I reintegrated back into the community. I started to work at jobs. They were having trouble with finding employees for those jobs. I filled that role for the better part of a year. And we did such a good job. The couple other folks that were in the program with me, they decided to make that entire portion of that company a sober-run company. So now, fast forward, I'm in the process of creating a similar program in another town right next to Keene, New Hampshire, doing the same thing. The biggest thing that I see what happens is when substance abuse programs try to open their doors is that most folks move into a place of really an ungrounded fear. And what an ungrounded fear is it's something that they don't have any experience with. They don't have any reality that grounds it in any truth, but they're worried about what could happen in the future. And they typically move to a place where they're not really sure what could happen, but their mind comes up with all these scenarios that they should be scared of. And I can tell you, in the better part of almost 11 years, I've never had anybody say that they escaped from treatment, broke into the house next door, and if you Google search that incident, you'll be really hard-pressed to find that across the United States. You'd be really hard-pressed to find something like that. It's not something that people that are going to be in that program are going to look to go to the house next door to be in trouble. And in this particular situation where the Trails program is concerned is that there's oversight. There's things that are in place there to continue to have safeguards that are in place to continue to provide support, structure, and environment so that before anybody ever gets to a place where they may not be doing well, it's pretty detectable at that point. You can see it based off of people's actions. There's things that can then take place. There's interventions that can then happen. and the amount of possibility of poor things happening versus the good things that can take place within the community. I mean, we've listened to stories of people where they've been directly impacted, and that can be everybody. If you're a small business owner and you've been struggling to find any type of really solid help, I mean, because as anybody, if I don't know if anybody's aware of this, but if you have the folks that are in recovery and you have plenty of people in town that are not, the folks that are in recovery, typically if all of a sudden they're reintegrating back into and having some self-esteem and some things that are taking place, they typically have a better shot at staying that place. And the folks that are already creating some of the stigma that's there are people that are in active addiction. They're still just sick folks, and they haven't found their way into that yet. And we base the folks that are in recovery over here based off of some of the stuff, the sensationalized things that hit the newspaper. And it doesn't mean that they're not real. It just means that those folks removed of those substances, removed of the things that create a lot of that behavior, you know, whether that stuff that got them incarcerated is as a result of trying to fulfill a craving for substances. That once you remove that substance and you start to try to introduce that person into a recovery process, that a lot of that stuff starts to go away. And that same individual can actually live a life that is beyond I never would have thought, you know, going into the 12 years ago that I would employ as many people as I do. I never would have thought that I would have went back to school for criminal justice, having been on that side of the arena. You would have told me that as I first started to cycle through that system, I would have looked at you and I would have colorful language. And so but to be in that place now, to see where I am now, to see where people that I know now, so people that I've cared about, some of the most impactful people that I've ever met in my life are people not only that are in recovery, they're people that have also been incarcerated. They're not bad people trying to get good. They're just sick people trying to get well. And ultimately, when we take away roadblocks, or when we put roadblocks in that create moments where we lose that momentum, when they go through and create 3 months of a program behind bars that allows them to build positive momentum and actual rehabilitation, and we put stuff in the way of that, we block that momentum. So then folks come out and they repeat the same stuff that they've always done. If we create more stressors for the folks that are coming out, those stressors will lead to return back to the recidivism that we all think of when we think of the incarcerated population. And if we remove those stressors and those roadblocks, we help that population and they become impactful, useful people in our society. And that's what everybody wants. I don't want to see people stay incarcerated. I don't think anybody here does. I don't think anybody listening does. I think we want to see people return and live a useful, meaningful life, because that helps us all. And if we decide to like kind of let aside all the fear that kind of gets in the way of that, I think we move into a place where we can remove some of those stressors. We can make a decision where I'm going to help. I'm going to take a step outside of what could happen, and I'm just going to turn around and I'm going to support removing some of those stressors, and hopefully the process can continue that they've started, you know, in the Trails program behind bars, and get out and actually start to reintegrate into the population here and work those jobs that people are not able to work right now. I'm dealing with employers right now at places that they're closing divisions of their business. They're leaving leases because they can no longer afford them, not because they don't have good products, only because that they can't find the help to keep the doors open. That's sad. That's sad. We got some folks that would kill for a second chance. Poor true reviewers, right? So it's like, but we have folks that would turn around and do anything for a second chance, right? Like I would have done anything for a second chance. I started out with nothing, and I would have done anything for a second chance. And it was a store manager at a KFC Taco Bell that gave me a second shot. So, I mean, we have an opportunity to turn around and really step outside of the comfort zone, or maybe some of the fear that comes up, and to make a better decision to allow to be able to let some services into the community, and really just have an open dialogue about what we can do to work with a facility that's coming in, rather than to have a negative response toward it. And so that's really the only comment that I have is I have a very big personal experience vested in seeing programs like this so that people can have a second chance at life. So I really appreciate being able to come in tonight, and it was nice to hopefully I get to meet some of you afterward. Thanks.
If I could add to Brian's facility in Manchester is directly across the street from our charter school. And there are no issues.
We've never had an incident once.
How long is the facility now?
Since 2015?
How many incidents at the charter school?
I mean, yeah.
If I could get Whitney Davis to come on up. She's one of our clinicians. Tell you a little bit about herself and her story.
Hello, everybody. I'm Whitney Davis. I am what is this?
Dave broke it.
All right, well, I'm putting it there so it doesn't distract me. I'm Whitney Davis. I'm a substance use counselor at Sullivan County Department of Corrections Trails Program. And I also would like to reiterate, what these lovely guys just said, who happen to be my friends, which is really quite amazing. I am a woman in long-term recovery, and I also actually was incarcerated at Sullivan County Department of Corrections from 2010 until 2011. My sobriety date is January 11th, 2010, like I just said. And today, because I have had a second chance, I'm able to work there because of people like Dave and Derek and Donna. They've allowed me to, be of use to society, which is really the opposite kind of what my life was like. So the only reason why I'm clean and sober today is because I had support. I come from a family of middle class, and they didn't give up on me. I had burned a lot of bridges, but they learned how to set boundaries and kind of, allow me to work through that stuff without enabling me. My first job was at a pizza place. I was not making much money. If you told me I had to get out from the jail and go onto the street and try to find an apartment, I wouldn't have been able to. A big thing when you're early in recovery is having support, especially recovery support. And for me, that looked like going to a lot of different types of meetings, and that took up a lot of time. So if I was working full-time to pay for a living, I wouldn't have been able to go to the meetings, which means I wouldn't be sober, which also means I wouldn't be standing here today. And it means I wouldn't have the opportunity to work with these folks that I work with on a daily basis. And I guess for me, I have to feel, I was born and raised here, and this is my community. My grandmother went to Stevens in the 20s, so I get Claremont, I get it. These are my peeps, right? You guys are my peeps. And so I have to feel like I have a heavy heart when I think about all of the people that I've known that have gotten sober and that have relapsed as a result of not having safe and sober housing. And I have a heavy heart when I watch these folks, my beautiful, amazing clients, make these transformations that are unbelievable, when they switch their thinking from criminality until wanting to really be productive members of society and not holding that guilt and shame anymore and walking through these barriers. And then they get out, and we're telling them they have to go to the same place where they came from, where there's usually substance use, domestic violence, or just it's unsafe. So basically, I think what we're telling our folks is, yes, great, get sober, recover. Sorry, now you deal with it on your own. Sorry. And I think a lot of times what we hear too is not in our backyard, as far as wanting to have sober living here. Sorry guys, but it is in your backyard. We have so many folks who are out there right now who have come out of other places, either jail or who haven't gotten sober, who are just walking around on the streets, We say we want to clean up the streets, right? We do. Nobody wants drugs around. Nobody wants criminal activity around. How do we do that? By being proactive, right? We allow folks to have a sober place to go. By doing that, they then have the opportunity, right? Instead of going back into the same old area, the same old place that they went before. Relapse goes up here. When you have sober, safe housing, it lessens so much. And so many times, you know, I helped run the aftercare portion too, and what I would see is that the people who weren't able to stay sober or be successful in that part of the program was a big part of housing. And these are parents. So we're telling kids, sorry, your dad doesn't deserve a sober house. He needs to go live on the street. Tough luck for you. That's what we're saying when we don't allow the opportunity to have sober living. Kind of hurts my heart. So the need is there, and I really, truly believe that this community will be a better place. We will save money in the long run. Streets will get cleaned up. We will see less criminal activity if we allow people who are suffering from substance use disorders to have a place that is helpful, that is sober. Then they can reintegrate into the community, have like the recovery support groups, right? So like the community center and I can't even think right now. Thank you. The recovery center, I should know this, wow. The recovery center is right there too for additional support. We talked a lot about getting people into the community to work. People want hard workers, and my clients are hard workers. I know I was a hard worker, and I still am. And I think it's just part of wanting to be productive, wanting to be a productive member of society for me, as well as wanting to have a purpose. Because stuck in an addiction, you don't feel like you have a purpose. So that's all I have. Thank you very much for listening.
Donna McGee talk a little bit about the Trails program and talk a little about the needs that we need for sober housing in our aftercare program.
Go over to the broken podium. Donna McGee, Program Director. I'm not going to bore you with a lot of details, especially after such excellent speakers about what the need is. But real quickly, the Trails program, speaking of Second Chance, started with grant funding. The Second Chance grant funding in 2008, 2009 helped us start this program. And I know there was a lot of skepticism about bringing such a program into Sullivan County, but boy, I have had the privilege since 2010 to be part of that, starting in the clinical team like Whitney did, and you know, now I'm the program director. So I've watched this program evolve and help people throughout time. It's a 90-day in-house program. We spend time talking about trauma, addiction, mental health needs, coping strategies. We talk a lot about transitioning into employment and employment skills, all the things that everybody has told us is what is needed. And then we sit down and listen from time to time and say, okay, what are we doing? What works? What doesn't work? We do a lot of individual work with people. And really, we have an excellent program, in my opinion. We have an excellent team, and we see a lot of, like Whitney said, a lot of transformations, but then we send them out the door. Not that I'm interested in controlling anybody's lives afterwards, but boy, a lot of those folks tell us that it's really, really hard. Once they're out the door and on their own, their biggest difficulties really about being in an environment that they had actually come from in the beginning that helped create the problems that they came in with. So they often spend, 6-8 months with us and get, really in a different headspace and a different way of thinking, and then they go back to that. So we started to look at some of the information coming in from aftercare, from our folks that were giving us feedback, and they kept saying, I can't live here. Now I'm unstable in stable housing. The shelter's really not I'm not trying to badmouth the shelter in any way, but the shelter's not a safe place for folks who are asserting recovery. So it's really the missing piece now, looking at all the information and certainly listening to the people who we work with. They keep consistently telling us that they need a safe place to go. So that's all I have.
Yeah. Questions? And we can start to look and see if there's any online, but we can start with the room.
Does anyone have any questions? Yes, sir.
So when you go into sober housing, how long is the sober housing period?
It would vary, but you know, the success rates show that folks that remain in sober housing around that 12-month window have a better opportunity of being successful in the community.
So why do you think that it will be successful here? This is a big transition going from trails to the sober housing, and then in this transition, housing, job, education, whatever. What local model do we have, or are there no local models?
There are no local.
How succeed?
There are no local models in Sullivan County, but there are local models for, you know, from our panel that we've had, part of our panel that we're here tonight, that were experts. I think Sullivan County is really prepared to take on this challenge simply because we have everything in place. We have a clinical team already in place. We have an aftercare program that is in place already. We have clinicians, community corrections officer who currently works in and out of the community, both in the DOC and in town. And quite frankly, we're used to dealing with this population, and we're prepared to deal with this population. With it, we are the Department of Corrections. We understand sanctions. So if there are issues with our population and our folks living in sober housing, we're prepared to deal with those, anything that comes up in those sanctions. And we are partnered with everybody, with folks in this community anyway, from West Central Behavioral Health to Headrest, Probation and Parole, Valley Regional Hospital. I think we're prepared to address everything that comes our way.
And these folks, I mean, people coming out of Sullivan County House of Corrections are not different from the people coming out of Stratford County House of Corrections. So it's the same population that's worked, you know, in Stratford County. It's not that different. It isn't different.
And there were some models that we looked at from Kentucky and across the nation that in rural areas, quite different geographically, but boy, they hit the nail on the head and they're dealing with the same problem. So we kind of really just took a look at what they were doing too.
These people that are going to be coming out of trails, are they already in the workforce working, or are they just looking for a job?
No, our population transitions from 90 days in treatment to work release before they go on electronic monitoring. So our population, once they're released from custody, most of them are employed.
Maybe this is a good segue. Oh, sorry.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we've heard from the testimony, Somersworth, Dover, probably Maine, Portsmouth, Keene. Was there a Keene facility? Mm-hmm. We have none here. Mm-hmm. We need one here, because otherwise there's a big void. It's empty, and there's plenty of need here. And this can improve the community by having those sort of successful operations in here in Claremont. So I'm hoping that we can complete the work, get the money, and get this thing online.
Thank you.
I think it's great. We do have a lot of support in this community. My kind of question is where it is located. Yes, we have the great system right there on the corner, but on the very next corner is where one of our biggest issues is. You know what I'm saying? So what about location? I mean, I'm not trying to, I've traveled those streets looking for my niece, you know, good many a nights trying to find her. And it's right where you're going, you know, and that scares the living daylight out of me.
We'll let Whitney address this.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, no, I totally understand the concern there, and you would think that putting people who are transitioning and to be in recovery into an area that's so populated with probably people using would be a bad thing, right? But I guarantee you, if we put a place of sober living with correctional officers standing there all the time, probation and parole coming in and out, people aren't gonna be using around there, right?
I've seen a lot crazier
They're-
things, that's all I'm
No,
saying.
no, they're just gonna wanna beat feet, because, you know,
Yeah,
I wouldn't wanna chill out there and be using on the corner if there's a probation officer or a correctional officer there. So what I think that's gonna do is I think it's gonna help clean up the area, personally.
And we will hold our folks accountable. They will have community service obligations, work employment obligations, educational obligations that we will put on our residents. We will also have a high level of security in the building that will be connected to the security camera system at the DOC. So we will know what is going on in our neighborhood. Again, what we do well is watch our folks. That's what we do. We watch our folks.
Ryan had something to add.
And just to point out too, like the difference between like programs that I run and the programs that are being proposed, like the amount of deterrents that come with, like, so when somebody comes into one of my programs, there's nothing I have as far as leverage necessarily with that client, right? There's not, they just don't have it. Where these folks, there's conditions that come with them participating in this program. So that's a very unique thing where like there's actual leverage that they have to participate in the program, and things when things, if things actually go wrong, there's a process that's in place to be able to correctly identify it, which I have to struggle to try to reason with somebody to go into a level of care that they have to participate in. That's not the case here. You remove a huge barrier by that. I spend most of my evenings, my staff spends most of their evenings when something like that happens, trying to work with somebody in order to, not to make an irrational decision based off of either a slip or what takes place. Where this is concerned, there's already something that's in writing that is part of them even participating in the program, which is a huge difference, and I look at it as an upside, personally.
Hopefully that helped.
Great question.
Yeah, we supervise this population very well.
you probably already said this, but how many houses are, I know it's a building, how many people is it looking to hold?
We're looking to open right around 30.
It's definitely needed, I totally agree with you. I was just.
Thank you. We'll let Tyler Barry come and speak. Tyler is one of our Trails grads. He has completed the 90 days program. He's currently in work release, and this is the young man that's working for PBS.
Hey guys, I'm Tyler Barry. I just want to express my concerns that we do need a sober house. I've done everything correctly I can. I was an addict to Suboxone for 3 years, and honestly, I'm kind of glad I did get arrested because, even though I wasn't using needles or anything like that, I think it saved my life. It saved my kid's life, my family heartache. I've had the whole team here as support. My mom's been my biggest support. Without that, I might have relapsed, but I've been clean a little over a year now, and I did the carpentry program. I've been working for almost 2 months now. But the thing that the whole program is missing is a sober house. I'm currently incarcerated, and I know plenty of good people that want to get out there working, But the thing is they don't have a place to live. And when you have nothing, you have no hope. And when those people have no hope, ultimately they do relapse. Luckily, I have the support when I do get out, and I am going to have a place to live, but there is those people that don't, And like these guys have said, for the people that can beat addiction, they can beat anything. They really are hard workers, And I'm glad my company gave me a chance because there's a few other people there that were at one point incarcerated at Sullivan County, and they're great workers. So, ultimately, I do feel this is a need, and I think it would be great for the community.
Thank you.
This is Rachel. She is also a Trails grad.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm not a long-term recovering addict. I've only been in recovery for 7 months now, but I've completed the Trails program and I've been working for almost 3 months. I work 10-hour days, 5 days a week, and I'm still housed at the House of Corrections by choice. I had the chance to get out on EM. My place was approved, and it came down to the very last day where I realized that that home wasn't safe for me to go to, and it wouldn't have been a good support place for me to go to. So I'm still, incarcerated, still going to work, still doing everything I need to do, and I'm set to have my early release date March 5th. And even now, I'm not sure if I have a stable place to go to with the support that I would need to stay in recovery. I think that for other people in my position, because I know the sober house would be open much later than it would be for me to be needed, but for other people that'll end up in my position, having a place where I could have that support and where they could have other people like-minded and a team of people like the team that we have in the Trails program, because the Trails program saved my life. I would not be the person I am today if it wasn't for that program. And I think that other people having that opportunity to further it after incarceration, to further it after that 90 days, it would be phenomenal, because I know that I still need that support even now, and I know I'm going to need support like that for a long time, whether it be from family, from friends, from other programs, from meetings, whatever it may be. But having something like that around here would benefit so many people going through this. And I believe that as a community, this is an issue that needs to be solved. And housing is probably the first step in it.
If I could put a little, one of the problems right now is affordable housing, and Rachel's in that boat, so if you know of a place that's affordable housing, please contact us. We are looking for safe and affordable housing, at least for the few people that are still being released. So if you want to know if there's something you can do right now, please contact me if you're aware of a fairly low price for monthly rent, because we're in that place, and I know I'm speaking, looking at the choir here. It's a struggle. So
Just either you or Dave speak to this wouldn't be free housing, would be rental. If you want to speak to how that would work, either community service or.
The folks that will be living on sober housing are men and women that are released from incarceration to begin with. They're all employed. There would be a weekly fee for them to stay in the house. Again, the fee is not, is making it affordable, so hopefully they can afford the rent the obligation that we're asking them to pay for us, but we will also put additional community service obligations on them. So our population that is incarcerated that isn't working full-time, we will expect to eventually work full-time. Population that comes to us that may be working in part-time status, we will require them to perform community service and participate in educational opportunities. So again, they have to, all of us in this room for the most part have a 40-hour-a-week plus obligation. Rachel's working 50. It's a 50-hour-a-week obligation. She works harder than a lot of people. We will expect our residents to have that same level of commitment. So again, it will be affordable. They will be able to stay there. They will be able to hopefully set some money aside, and when they eventually leave sober housing, they'll be prepared and be able to afford safe and affordable housing.
Would the county be a landlord?
The county be a landlord?
You said somebody was going to collect money.
Yes, the county would be taking in the funds for the rent in a separate account from the regular DOC. Yeah.
What are the forms of the housing that you're looking for? Rooms, a boarding house, or full units with full kitchen facilities and bedroom and so forth? What's the spectrum of what constitutes good affordable housing for this?
Well, all you have to do is calculate how much, like Rachel's working 50 hours a week. If she's making $8.75 an hour, you can calculate that, right? How much is she gonna be able to bring in to pay for a monthly, a rental, and then still be able to buy food and all the other things that we all need? It's really, she would have to technically work probably about 70 hours a week in order to be able to afford a rental income for a one-bedroom in this community.
You're talking about as far as the design of the building itself?
Yeah.
Yeah, we would have common areas and a common kitchen on the lower level. We would also have a conference room in there, but we would have refrigerator, stoves, cooking areas, and dining areas on the bottom floor. The second floor of the facility, our plan, we're not positive, but we will separate the housing between men and women. They would have bathroom facilities, laundry facilities, and 2 persons per room bunk areas. So it's not going to be an open dorm like currently at the DOC in treatment. It'll be more private. We will have alcove spaces for the computers, so they can take classes online and have some private time, and we will have visiting areas in the facility. Plan is to also have a community conference room on the first floor. The entire facility will be cameraed too. Again, we are the DOC. We like to know what's going on. And we will fob the facility. So the men and women living there will have a fob that allow them into certain areas. So they'll be able to, the men will be able to go to the men's areas, the women to the women areas. And that's not to say they can't pop the door and try to hold it open, but it'll be on camera. So we have a level of control. Yes, sir.
Thank you for the presentation. It's well done. My question is going to be as far as the housing goes, but one of the things also with employment is the ability to get from point A to point B in transportation. So can you address how that's going to be tackled as far as looking at helping them also get from where the house is to wherever they have to get to for a job? Is that going to be somehow left to them? Is there going to be some way we have some infrastructure with transportation so they don't get to that situation?
Currently, we have a fair amount of our men and women in work that are using bus service. So they get on the bus line, and that's part of the attraction for us to be downtown because of those services. We do have some folks that have licenses. A good chunk of our population, though, once they become gainfully employed at a facility, at a business, they end up finding transportation, hooking up with someone back and forth for rides. So that's a concern. The population doesn't have their licenses. But they are managing to get to work now, and they're in Unity. So I'm thinking in town and, right on Sullivan Street, it's going to be a little bit easier.
We also have the connection with the volunteer driver program within the Sullivan County Transportation as well.
And we have taken advantage of that. And currently, I'll give them a shout out because they're just a fantastic community partner, is Southwestern Community Service does provide a bus up to the DOC Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays now, if necessary, if needed. And our men and women will get on the bus, go into town, search for employment, and then they'll transport them back up to the DOC after. It's worked very well, and can't thank them enough.
Right, I agree.
What are your timelines possible for opening the doors on this transition housing here?
I'm going to let Derek take that question.
Yeah. The timeline, we're looking to complete the purchase of the facility in the April timeframe, and then we would begin the renovation. We haven't gotten far enough along in the construction contracting process to know, is it a 6-month project or an 8-month project? But for the scope that we're looking at, I think 6 to 8 months is probably a reasonable estimate. So if we start around May-ish, maybe it'd be done by the end of the year. But we'll know more the further along that we get. So that's one of the unknowns right now. But that's a reasonable timeline, end of the calendar year.
And in the meantime, that's why you need the temporary housing.
That was just me kind of saying, this isn't going away even with the plan. We have people who are legitimately looking, who would be not incarcerated right now. They would be in the community with housing if they could afford it and if they could connect the dots, but we can't. We don't have anything.
Rachel needs it in about 6 weeks.
Yes.
So, 6 to 8 months from May is not going to help her at all. But it'll help the next batch of graduates that we have through the program. So.
And we have sent numerous men and women out of the county just simply because they did not have a place to go. Sarah was recent, but she's certainly not the first. We've sent men and women to Manchester, Somersworth, Pennacook, different facilities that would give them a safe place to go. Lebanon
Yes.
recently.
Lebanon,
So.
yesterday.
So we have an online question. Part of it was, there are a few questions actually. Is this a done deal is one. Approximately when would it be ready? You kind of already answered that. And then additionally, what does the Claremont PD feel about this? Think about this.
So for the done deal, I'll take it, Dave. The done deal, there's one final step that we have to do to get the final approval, and that's from the county delegation. And so we're hoping to have that meeting. We haven't scheduled it yet, so there's a few members of the delegation here. We're trying to get that done in February, but we haven't reached out to you to see when everyone's available. So once they give us their final blessing, that's the last thing we need in terms of approvals. We do have another coordination step with the city of Claremont. That's going to be happening with the planning board, which is the 27th of this month. So is that next Monday? And so that'll be, according to New Hampshire state law, we have a requirement to engage with the planning board to obtain non-binding consultation. And so that's when we're going to do that. We have other negotiations with the city. I've been in touch with the city manager to discuss that, what the future looks like. As far as the Claremont Police Department, I don't want to speak for Chief Chase, but we have had a chance to meet with him and other city officials. He said he's on board. He knows that there's a need for it. The fire chief, Chief Burr, is also in agreement that this is a needed project for this community. And was there another part to that question?
You're not going to tell us how many hearts and thumbs ups we got?
Try not to hit those. Okay, so there's another question. Does the county somehow subsidize for any additional resources needed, such as emergency services? I don't know if he means for the actual facility. I will say in terms of the operating expenses for the facility, our expectation is it will be self-sufficient. So the rents that Superintendent Barry mentioned that we would charge for the residents to live there, based on our projections, and some of that is if we have a 30-bed facility, we've made some conservative estimates that if we have 20 to 25 people living there, paying rent, we should be more than able to cover utilities, any other operating expenses like cleaning supplies, things just to make sure we can maintain and upkeep the building. And to also include, although we haven't negotiated it yet, but a payment in lieu of taxes to the city of Claremont, since this building would come off the tax roll. So if we are able to negotiate, and it is our intention to negotiate a pilot, it'll help keep the city of Claremont whole in terms of tax revenues. I know that's been a frequent comment and concern from the community is this is going to hurt the tax rate. Well, if we can negotiate a pilot that's close to or even more potentially than what's being paid now, then it will not hurt the city of Claremont from a tax revenue standpoint.
If I may, the other expectation is that it'll ebb and flow a little bit in terms of revenue. And in the good years, we put money in a reserve fund. And in years where we're under revenue, that money comes out to cover operating expenses. The overarching goal is to not have the Sullivan County taxpayers foot the bill.
My guess is where that question was, paying for services, was that this is going to be more police, fire type thing. The thing is just the opposite. The fact these people will be supervised, the police, fire, costs will go down. And these are people that are in the community unsupervised, and now they'll be supervised. So the cost for police, fire, Golden Cross, whatever, is going to be less with this facility than not more, which I think is where that question was coming from.
And I think Andrew touched on it a little bit too. I mean, this should help our overall budget for the Department of Corrections, because this is going to probably help our recidivism rate. So we should have fewer people coming back to the DOC over time as they maintain their sobriety. Another question: where's the nearest existing sober facility currently? I don't know if there's anything in like Lebanon.
There's a Headrest in Lebanon, so 40 40 minutes, and then Ryan runs one in Keene for men. Very small place in Leb.
Okay.
Nothing in Sullivan County.
Next question is, will residents be able to re-enroll in health insurance once transitioned and have access to other benefits?
Currently, what we do right now is that Medicaid expansion is often the opportunity for people to post-release get their feet back under them and get some health insurance, and then once they start earning money, then we can point them in the direction of the exchange, because after you exceed the amount that you're eligible for Medicaid, then you have to go on the exchange and purchase your own insurance, which we can help them do. And right now, Mr. Perrin is our expert at getting people into a suspended status. So the day they walk out the door, they have Medicaid if they're eligible.
And while they're incarcerated, their medications are coming off your property taxes.
Correct.
So this is why we want to get them, transition them out, and they can be on Medicaid and stuff. But while they're incarcerated, Medicaid does not cover, nothing covers them. It's on your property taxes.
The next question we have is, does the state regulate these facilities?
I'm not touching that one.
Andrew or Ryan, you guys maybe, is that one you guys can take?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little. So again, this is different than sort of what we would certify with the New Hampshire Coalition of Recovery Residences. There's a lot more to it, and I say that in the good way. Generally speaking, the state, because of federal fair housing laws and some other statutes, effectively, and a lot of this will be very similar here, when you have a group of people in recovery, it's effectively seen early on for generally the first few years as being a disability, if you will. So you can't, effectively they're living together and acting as a familial unit. So they'll have chores, they'll have things that they do, they'll shop. My understanding is they're going to cook their own meals, things that other folks, normal folks that most of us in here do regularly and probably take for granted, they'll be doing the same thing. So to answer your question, the state does not, or the person's question online, the state does not certify. But there are organizations, NH Core, we're under the umbrella for NAR, which is the National Alliance of Recovery Residences. They've done an incredible amount of research, lots of statistics and data and white papers and such. They work with SAMHSA, but in a lot of ways, what we do, we're kind of, not like an NGO, nothing like that, but we kind of work with the state, so we do stuff with HHS and to a lesser extent, maybe BDAS and some of those folks, but.
I will say, though, there's a bill, and I don't know if Representative Merchant, that's what you're going to talk about.
311.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't want to steal your thunder. You're in a much better position to speak to it than I am.
I think one of the things we want to separate out is that there's the building code, which we have to be in compliance with and so forth, et cetera, because you get into multi-unit housing and so forth, et cetera, which is different than people operating the program itself. So I'm not sure if the person's talking about the building code as far as the safety of the building, the fire marshal codes and things of that nature, or they're talking about the program within the physical building, whether the program itself is being regulated by the state. So I wasn't clear about the question in the first place.
Health and Human Services does not regulate, inspect, right?
They're not in respect to the municipality.
But you mentioned House Bill 311, which is very much geared towards life safety and fire code issues. From my reading of the bill and the authors of it, it sounds like it's kind of a Manchester-centric piece of legislation.
Very much so.
So yes, the state's getting more involved, but not in probably the day-to-day operational runnings of a sober facility.
Correct. I just want to be clear that there's a difference between running the program, which is in the physical building, versus the physical building, which the state does have oversight too, just like any other physical building. So I want to be clear with people that we're talking about two separate things in my mind, as far as keeping it covered.
And there is a distinction to be made between sober living and transitional living, so it matters what we call it when it comes down to the end.
The next question was, will this be a secure facility? The answer is yes, it will be secure. We do want to be able to have, Superintendent Barry mentioned having a community conference room on the main floor. So the main door would be unlocked, but before you could get back to any of the residential living quarters, that's where the fob access would be required. So you wouldn't be able to go back in and wander into someone's room unless you had the right key. But we are trying to make this a community facility, and having access to that conference room. You know, the downstairs basement of the Claremont Savings Bank is a wonderful resource, and it's used a heck of a lot. So where our conference room wouldn't be that big, but it'd be the same type of idea that if community organizations needed a place to have a meeting, they'd be able to use our conference room. So there would be access to the public during normal business hours, but then after that, it would be locked down. Superintendent Barry also mentioned the cameras inside and out. That's a detail that we have to coordinate. I don't know what the rules and regulations are for having external security cameras. Obviously, you can't have it, you know, shooting down the street into someone's bedroom window, but we would like to be able to have some coverage on Franklin Street and Sullivan Street, and be able to, again, as Superintendent Barry mentioned, have that linked back to the control center at the Department of Corrections, so that if there is something that looks like it's illegal or illicit activity going on, that they can then pick up the phone and call Claremont Police Department. This is another good one. So, Mrs. T, everyone knows Carol Thabarge. When I was at West Terrace, she was Mrs. Catani before she was Mrs. Thabarge. She became Mrs. T. So she asks, will the residents be transferred from other counties, or is this just for Sullivan County? Perhaps this has already been addressed. Not tonight, Mrs. T, you're the first one, so good question. So no, the intent of this project is to service the people in Sullivan County, the residents of Sullivan County. Whether they are coming through the Department of Corrections and the Trails program, or our county residents that have been through another, I guess I'll call it approved treatment program, something where we've got assurances that that they've been sober, they've been through a program, and are going to commit to the same set of rules as our Trails graduates. But we know that without any other facility in the county, we want to be able to service all of the potential residents of Sullivan County. But I know some of the fears, you know, Ryan talked about these ungrounded fears, like there's going to be all of a sudden bus loads from Manchester, Nashua, and Concord dropping people off. That's not going to happen, because those people would not be eligible to live in this facility. We've sized it, roughly the 30 beds, based on the requirement of the number of people that are graduating from our Trails program every year. The number fluctuates, but it's been around the mid-50s to as high as the mid-70s. So, and nearly half of those people leave the program without safe, stable housing. So if you do the math, let's just pick a middle number, say there's 60 people a year, and roughly half of them lack stable and secure housing, then you need to be able to have a place that can accommodate around 30. And so that was kind of the method behind the madness for how we sized it the way we did. The beds that we're proposing to buy are going to be bunkable, so that if we ever got into a situation where we had a surge capacity for a short period of time, we'd be able to bunk some people up and maybe have, I don't know, I'm just picking a number, but maybe like 35 people live there. But again, that would be a surge. We envision that to be temporary. The steady state number will be around 30.
Our folks are incarcerated in other facilities, so we would work collaboratively with those facilities to bring them back to this area if that's where they're from.
Next question.
There's one down there.
Oh, sorry, we have one in the room?
So the program director talked about sober versus transitional housing. Could you elaborate?
Sure. It's a technical term. It has to do with the level of providing services versus not providing services, but I imagine you guys could probably speak a little bit more intelligently about it.
Transitional is not being offered here, just sober at this facility.
It's actually more of the transitional piece, but I don't know what we're going to call it in the technical terms, because we will be providing on-site services, including the aftercare and treatment and urine drug screening, and things like that.
Is the
So-
capacity of trails big enough?
Yes,
Is the capacity of the sober house big enough?
yes, in my opinion.
What happens when, if it's successful, people are gonna get better? What happens when the residential numbers drop?
We have a party.
Yeah,
Big one.
there's always
Sober party.
recruitment, new recruitment, unfortunately, in this world of drugs that we're in, and alcohol. Let's not leave alcohol out of the, we spent a lot of time talking about it, so.
Yeah, so because it's a substance use disorder and it's not curable, but it's treatable, we're always gonna see people coming in, no matter what. So, and unfortunately, people do relapse too. But the expectations for the transitional living, whether it's called sober living or transitional living, everybody's expectation is to be sober. I don't know if that's helpful, but they're all probably gonna be urine screened and all that stuff.
Yeah.
At the last meeting, it was mentioned that this is going to be voluntary. Okay, what we're missing here, I think, a little bit is, I'm Steve, I'm a graduate from the Trails program.
Yeah.
I was very reluctant at first not to want to do the program, but Mrs. McGee, Superintendent Barry, and Mr. Perrin and others had reeled me back in. I just want to say quickly that I had to do the program for say, but I was thankful that I did because of the stuff. I mean, we're talking about drugs and alcohol. We're missing out on things like relationship problems, family issues. And I mean, not that some people want this sober housing in this community needs this. You know, and I commend you guys for this because you don't have to do this. You don't have to set all this up. You're doing it because you care. You're doing it because you want to see this community change, and so do I. You know, everything is going to have, you know, and I've heard a few times, well, why does it have to be there? You know, why can't it be in a different state or up a different avenue? No matter where you put it, there's always going to be questions and concerns. And another key thing is, to my knowledge, people that are forced to do something are less reluctant to want to do it. Where it's voluntary, I mean, these people have the mindset they're going in there to want change. They want to be different. They don't want to have to go and run the drugs or the alcohol or what, you know, whatever the case may be, to have a better life. And I mean, I've been sober now for over 2 years. And a lot of that is, one of the first steps you have to admit that you have a problem. The second step is doing something about it. There's a lot of people out there that, like you guys are talking about, that have no place to go. I was very thankful I had a place to go, but there's a lot of people that don't. And so what do? They go back to doing what they know. And that's the sad part about it, is because there's a lot of people out there that have been doing this sort of thing for a long, long, long time, and that's all they know. And for you guys to come up with this idea of having a transitional housing, I mean, again, we're always talking about drugs and alcohol. There's other things, there's other pieces of the pie that contribute to this also. It's, you know, like I had mentioned, family issues, girlfriend/wife issues, custody issues. And in the trails, that's what I got a lot from it. It wasn't just about drugs and alcohol. You guys had addressed every step and every facet of the motion to, it wasn't just about drugs and alcohol. And again, and I'll leave it with this community, there's a lot of people that I feel don't want it, but this community needs this. And again, I think it's gonna be on a plus side because it's a voluntary thing. They're not being forced to go from trails into this. The people that wanna go into this wanna change, wanna get better. They don't wanna have to, run drugs or whatever anymore to survive. But a lot of people, that's all they know, is to do that. That's their survival. It's put in their mindset that, this is how I survive, this is the only thing I know. And you guys, by putting this halfway house in, I commend all of you, you know, and I'm hoping that I can be involved in every step of the way. I'm gonna try to be, and again, I'm on the other side. I had gotten myself into some trouble, but I sit back and I think, they opened my eyes. They opened my eyes a lot. I look at things a lot differently now. And it's from help from all you guys. And again, if you don't have that support system, what are you gonna do? You're gonna go back to what you know. Thank you, that's all I got to say.
So I wanted to just say a few things, because as the night goes on, you hear different things. And one of the things that I'm hearing, and I really want to express outwardly, is the fact that I've had many people come in and look for work, because I helped Tom Davis kind of help him with his buildings on Walnut Street for 10 years. So people would come down and they'd be like, Michelle, I need work. Can you hook me up? I'm like, I'm gonna pay you $5 an hour. That's all I got for a budget. And they'd work. They'd work hard, but they were clean. They'd stay clean. They'd come and eat. They'd sit at the table because they didn't have anywhere else to go. They'd stay clean. Residents in this town open their homes up, whether you believe it or not, and it's kind of weird, but it's wonderful at the same time. There are folks out there like myself who let people come into their homes who need help, who want to stay sober, who don't want to be out in the middle of the mess. Not to say Walnut Street isn't part of the mess. It's a lot cleaner than it was 10 years ago, I'll tell you that. I'm very proud of the people that have worked. I'm sad that some of those people have passed away. We lost a guy, he just didn't have anywhere to go, and he ended up overdosing. I have 2 kits of Narcan that I've always had from training, in case I had to go out in the street and Narcan someone, because it's that close to me. That's what I've lived in for 10 years. That's what I've supported for 10 years, because I didn't understand what even drugs were prior to that when I moved here. So to elaborate on the fact of housing, I've kind of was a house for those people. So having a house for those people would be great. It would be positive, because there's probably 20 other people out there like myself, which I can think of right off the top of my head, families that are doubled up right now because one family has nowhere to go. Mom's clean. Mom doesn't want to mess up. Mom wants to keep her kids. This mom and dad are sober. They have kids. They let them come stay at their house, but they can only stay there for so long because then they have to move. It's called couch surfing. And you have a lot of families right now in Claremont. And when I say families, I mean your children, the future of our community. This is our community, Sullivan County, our community. Those are our children, and they're being couch surfed at this very moment. So how do we stop that? We put a facility in so that that stops, so that those children can go do an art project in the conference room with their family. It stops the couch surfing. It helps people to get back on their feet. It's so important that you understand some of the lingo of it. Couch surfing. Families moving from house to house to house with their children, borrowing cars, mine included, to drive to Newport to get their children to school. Because their children are in Newport going to school, but they're here in Claremont. And they can't get back to Newport to live because there's nowhere there either. So it's not just Claremont, it's everywhere. And it's affecting the outwardly towns and not so much the big cities. because the big cities have the programs. Now it's starting to come here and really affect us. So if you can see what it's like to be that family, packing your stuff up every night, picking your children up and moving them to a different place and then laying them down to go to bed. That person is trying to be a parent. That person's trying to be clean. That person's doing so much and struggling so hard. Wouldn't it be nice as our community taking care of our people, because there are people, having that house?
Going on, you hear a lot of these people, those people stuff.
yeah, there
There-
are people.
Yeah, if you go more than 3 degrees of separation from somebody that's had a substance abuse issue, you're damn lucky. And wait a while, it'll happen. And these folks are from the community. It's not like we're bringing people in, they're from Charlestown or something, they've been here in Claremont doing whatever. So there are sons and daughters and granddaughters and stuff, they're of this community, and they'll be here whether they're supervised or not. They can either be here supervised, or they can be here, on the streets. So that's part of it. And the other thing, I mean, the first Trails graduation I went to was a kid that 2 years earlier had been playing sports with my son, done something stupid. You're 18 now, it has consequences. We've had a nurse from the local hospital that started popping pills and stuff, so it's not, it's the whole gamut of life, and this community's life. And we're doing this because, yeah, it's a nice thing to do, but the thing is, this is good for the bottom line. If they don't go back to jail, it saves money. If they don't go back on drugs, it saves money. If they can get reunited with their kids, it saves money. So this is the right humanity thing to do, but it saves money too. That's the reason we can feel really justified in doing it. It's the right thing to do, and it saves tax, in the long run, I'm confident it saves taxpayers money.
One more. Speaking of money, I understand a large portion of the rehabilitation of the building will come from a couple of grants. Can you talk about those at this point?
Sure. Yeah, the current funding stack, and it's an estimated cost at this point until we get a more refined construction estimate, but we received a $500,000 community development block grant, so CDBG is the common acronym. The county has put $500,000 of its own money in this year's budget, and then we have a letter of commitment from New Hampshire Housing for $1.2 million, and another $1.1 million commitment from the Community Loan Fund. And Dartmouth Hitchcock has pledged $25,000. We've also applied to USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, Rural Development for $75,000. And we're actually in the process of working with Headrest. They're going to be submitting a grant on our behalf to help contribute to the capital cost of the construction. New Hampshire Charitable Fund has also said that they are going to try to help. They have some donors that like to give to municipal projects for renewable technology. We just recently completed a level 2 energy audit, so now we finally have some pricing and some return on investment numbers to indicate what it would, how the project would benefit from, for example, roof-mounted solar or a pellet boiler to replace the fuel oil boilers that are in the facility currently. So we'll have some different options and some other funding avenues that we intend to pursue. So that's the worst. What? I'm sorry. Yeah, that's we're trying to again minimize the impact on Sullivan County's taxpayers, and those numbers will become refined as we work through the final stages of design and get into construction. So we expect those costs would come down. So that's a worst case cost estimate. So before we get to the next question, I mentioned Mrs. T. There's been a lot of talk about elementary schools this week, and I just want to give another shout out to West Terrace. Beyond Mrs. T, Steve, who thanks for speaking, Steve, that was really powerful. Steve was one of my best friends in elementary school, so we're a couple of rugrats from West Terrace from way back. We've referenced Chief Chase before. Chief Chase, also a proud graduate of West Terrace, although he made it all the way when it was 6th grade. We stopped at 4th because that was the year that they did Disnard. So anyway, shout out to West Terrace. Next question was, how many times can a person go through this program? And I don't know if she means trails or sober housing, so I guess let's answer both.
The most times right now, we're looking at 3. We have had people go through 3 rounds of the program at Trails in the 90-day portion. We also have a relapse track, so that doesn't really include in that. So they come in, but they don't do the traditional 90 days. They come in for a retool. So I think 3 is pretty much, if
For trails.
you can't say, I'm not going to do 4 because I don't know where somebody's going to be at, and sometimes it takes that many times. And I will keep trying. So.
For Andrew and Ryan, with people that live in your facilities, do they come in, go out because they had an issue and come back in, or?
Sure, so most of the time, it's a very similar process. So I have typically kind of a rule of 3, and that just means that what I offer, it's not something that you're taking to. And I owe you more than to try to find an avenue for you to be able to actually find for something. So I just try to suggest other takes on it.
Yeah.
That's that being around 3 times up.
That's been my experience too, if there's something, maybe there's another program out there that is gonna speak to them. And at the end of the day, that's what we found as well, tends to work best. Yeah, I had a couple other things I was gonna say in terms of some cost saving stuff, but I'll wait for later. But yeah, same idea, kinda, maybe it's the baseball thing, 3 strikes, but that's generally what we do as well, and then we'll try to find them somewhere else to go, just to have a different experience.
But it's not linear, right? So it's not like.
Correct. It's fluid.
And sometimes it takes more than one go, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
I've even dismissed people and had them appeal the dismissal, and we're like, and they come back and they are awesome.
Yeah.
Just awesome. Sometimes it's just the process that they take.
Yeah, and I liken it sort of, if someone has chronic diabetes or perhaps cancer and something returns, like I don't get mad at them, I don't get upset with them that they're sick again or something, something's come up and they're not doing well. We try to find them help. So looking at it from that perspective, whether you believe it's an illness or not, when people do have these things occur, trying to get them the level of care that they need so that they can get well, it's incredibly important. Otherwise, we're doing them a disservice.
And it's always got to remain kind of fluid too. Like it's easy to say like it's a hard 3 no matter what the situation is, but every situation, everybody comes to you that sits in front of you with a very different story and a very different set of circumstances that they come with. And so sometimes having it remain fluid is, if somebody comes over for a 4th time, I've actually, in thinking about that, I've had multiple people on a 4th time against when everybody else is like, yeah, it's going against the rule. You're like, and you go and you keep it kind of fluid and moving, and they've done really well. So it just comes down to the situation and the person.
The clinical team does a very good job at measuring effort and progress. So I think that's always a factor that we take into account. Were that person that came back to Trails for that 3rd time, were they successful in the community for a while? Were they employed? Did they make progress? And that is all measured. And those are factors that we'll take into account when we decide yay or nay to allow that person back in treatment. I mean, it's really hard. It's really hard, I know, from the clinical perspective to tell someone who needs treatment that, you're not eligible. It's a struggle. I'll use Sarah. Sarah, it took 3. Was that smart for us to allow her back in for the 3rd time? I think you can ask her mom. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
None of us are ever going to know when that young man or woman is going to get it. Sometimes it's the first time, sometimes it's the second or third, but, you know, giving up is a really hard thing to do for us. It really is.
Thank you for not.
Just keep in mind that it's just like with alcoholism, it seems like it isn't even like a drug, but it is sadly. However, people who are in recovery for alcoholism will tell you it's for the rest of their lives. They will always be in recovery for the rest of their lives. And I believe that, you know, you have to keep that in mind, that these folks are going to be in recovery for the rest of their lives. Your daughter will always be in recovery. We'll always encourage her to be positive, but it's for the rest of her life. So it's something you just don't ever give up on. You just have a belief that it will and can get better, and it has for many people. So.
All right, next question was, has there been discussion around accommodating residents with young families? For example, a mother in recovery with young children?
Well, we're going to certainly work with custody cases, so we would provide a family space for visitations, and we do that now. We accommodate as best we can, and a shout out to the One for All Center, who's very, very helpful to us. But yeah, that's a really great question, but as it stands now, the families won't be able to live at the facility, but the parents, we would actively work towards custodial reunification and visitation 100%.
And then one other thing we talked about, so in the basement of the facility, where the printing presses used to be back when it was the Eagle Times building, that's where the communal kitchen and dining area will be. One of the things that we'd like to do, if we get it built, is have like a Sunday supper, spaghetti dinner or something like that, where you do invite in their kids and parents or whoever's taking care of their kids, and make it more of a communal thing to just get everybody together. So no, we won't have kids living there, but we do want to make sure we integrate them, as Donna said, and find ways to provide the visitation to continue to enhance the reintegration part with their families.
Especially for females who will be living here, that's incredibly important. Generally, they're the primary caregiver for children, and that's usually the number one or two reason that they'll leave recovery housing or treatment. So it's actually fantastic that you guys are going to be able to work to accommodate that, so kudos.
And the TLC folks are very collaborative with us, and I'm really looking forward to kind of bringing that to a new level. So.
Trying to refresh. Do you see any new ones in their chat? I'm not sure. I'm not seeing any news. Any parting shots from the audience? Panelists?
What kind of screening would the guests have?
The screening of the residents?
The residents?
No, the guests of the residents.
Oh, the ones visiting.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, that population is not under the DOC. The facility is not behind closed walls of the DOC. We will not screen the visitors who come into the facility like we would someone visiting at the DOC. We will watch our population, we will supervise our population, whether they're in visiting in the common areas or in the dining areas, we'll supervise them. But we do not have the authority to search that outside population like we potentially would at the DOC if we thought there was
So
something.
Ryan and Andrew, what do you guys see? Because you must have visitors come. So what's the community ethic as far as
we
that
have,
goes?
like, when it comes to like family visits and visitors and all those things, in 10 years, it's very, like, I've never had somebody sneak something into somebody or anything like that, or anything that would really cause, we can't search the visitors ourselves either, but ultimately,
part of the clinical process is really kind of vetting out who's an appropriate visitor and who's not. So during that time, during a clinical conversation between client and clinician, they're going to determine, like, is this a healthy visitor for you to even have? Is it Jimmy from the block, or is it, you know, your wife and kids? And after some history, and you know, it's part of a clinician's job to be able to build that rapport to determine those kind of things. And so we've never had an issue with it, and I have no DOC presence, and I've never had an issue with it.
I mean, we vet our visiting population. We can check our visiting population while they're incarcerated. So more than likely, as I transition out of the DOC, the same folks that would visit these men and women in the sober housing will be the folks that visit them at the DOC. I don't think the visitors will all be necessarily because they're released from incarceration. So we have a pretty good idea who the men and women that will be coming into our facility are.
And the residents are going to be drug screened anyway.
They
right?
are.
So if somebody brings something in and they take it,
Exactly, yeah. And same thing, like the residents that would be in this program are the same residents that would be in my program. There's legitimately no difference. I have people that are, you know, post-release. I have people that are in my sober living programs that are post-release from Berlin prison, and I don't have any issues, none at all. And so like nothing comes up because we do a good job at, you know, monitoring the actual program itself. So it just catches that there's a safeguard. If a flag goes up, we all look to the flag. And that is whether it's drug screening, whether it's the clinical support, whatever it may be, those things will catch those things really, really well.
And if you have a good lab that can do, you know, quantitative, qualitative analysis, it's an incredibly powerful tool. But also at the end of the day, having good staff, they'll see those changes in folks, and they'll be able to pick that stuff up. So, but that's a great question. Behavioral changes, I should say.
Again, being on the voluntary side of the people wanting to go in to do this, I don't think there's gonna be any issue as far as people bringing stuff in to hand off to somebody that's in there, because that's not why they're there. They're there to get sober, straighten their act up. So I don't think that's, I mean, I'm not a professional in any means, but the people that want to go there, want to go there. They want to go there because they want to get better. They don't want to go there so they can have Joe Schmo, whoever, bring them in, whatever the case may be. So I don't think that that's really going to be an issue.
Most of that population would choose not to go to the sober housing.
Right, I mean, it's just like the last time I heard some concerns, well, that it's going to create a bunch of riffraff and so on when you think about the JSL. Well, you got to be pretty dumb to create some issues or try to deal any drugs if, you know, cameras and the DOC is going to be there, probation, you know, the probation was mentioned might be in the same facility. I mean, you got to be pretty dumb to pull that kind of games, especially in that area. So if anything, in my eyes, it's going to deter it. You're always going to have those people that are going to do it, no matter what. But in my eyes, it's going to deter it from that area. If anything, it's not going to bring it to that area. It's going to deter it away from it.
Access to drugs is usually not a problem.
Right.
In any community, not just Claremont, but in any community. So you don't really need people to be couriers, I wouldn't think, to smuggle something into the.
Right, it's the matter of all these people want to change.
People want to get away from a facility. They don't want to hang out in the facility and everybody's there. So, you know, like if this is happening, they're going to go back to familiar haunts. You know, they're not going to create a new pocket of you know, unhealthy behavior that doesn't already exist. They're going to go back to a familiar one. They're going to leave the facility and go back to a place where it's comfortable and they can get away with it, not in a place that is going to get caught 30 seconds later.
Yeah. And on top of that too, alcohol is a drug and you can find that at Humvees, so.
That's a fact.
And mouthwash at Walmart.
Well, I see a lot of other
Any other?
going on at Humvees.
That's why we need sober living.
That's right.
Is that about I'll wrap it up for, I think, there are no more questions, Chad, from online.
Awesome.
So one quick thing I wanted to say, because that was some pretty great comments. Michelle said, those people are us. And I want to say, those people are Ryan, Andrew, Whitney, Rachel, Tyler. If you walked up on the street and saw Whitney, Andrew, or Ryan, you probably wouldn't guess that they're A, executive directors of pretty large organizations, and B, that they are in recovery themselves. And you look at the other end of where they are on the journey, you've got Rachel and Tyler, and they're just starting out. But they've got a heck of a lot of promise. They're working really hard, both in their jobs, they're working hard in their recovery. And that's what it looks like after you work really hard for 10 years. You turn into an executive director of a large organization. And so that's what those people are. And I guess that's one of the things that's been, that we've really struggled with some of the community perceptions is we don't want those people. And Claremont doesn't need this. Claremont doesn't want this. We don't want those people in our downtown. How is this going to hurt the Pleasant Street redevelopment if those people, and I'm just here to tell you that's what those people look like. They look like Andrew and Ryan and Whitney and Rachel and Tyler, and they're just like you and me because they're us. Yeah, and Steve, that's right. So thanks to the panelists. We really weren't sure how this was going to go. We didn't have a script. We didn't prepare the panelists. We just kind of said, tell your story and we'll see how it goes. It takes a heck of a lot of courage for the parents who probably haven't done a whole lot of public speaking about their personal journey, because it's a very personal journey. Incredible amount of courage. So thank you for helping us understand that perspective. For Rachel and for Tyler, probably not a whole lot of public speaking in your hip pocket either, but to come up and share kind of where you've been and where we think you're headed is pretty awesome too. Of course, Andrew and Ryan for providing the subject matter expertise, for driving a pretty long way tonight to be with us. It's going to be a late night for you, so I hope you drive safe. I'm glad it's not snowing out. But really, you provided answers to questions that, frankly, we just can't speak to. So without your years of expertise in this issue and your personal journey, which lends a lot of credibility, we can't thank you enough. So thanks. Thanks to Keith and the CCTV for airing this tonight. I hope people found this beneficial. Thanks to Kip Ryan and the What's Up Claremont, and for the people that tuned in and submitted questions. We really appreciate it. We weren't sure how that was going to work. I'm not the most technically savvy person you've ever met, so we were kind of fingers crossed it was all going to go well, and I think it did. So with that, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Barrett to send us home.
Well, so, again, I just wanted to, I was going to say, like, pretty much everything he just said. Your stories are inspiring. That your commitment to what you guys are doing shows in the fact that you drove an hour and a half or 2 hours to get here, stayed, you're willing to mingle with people after the fact and answer any other questions, and then still have an hour and a half drive home. So, and you have nothing to gain, which is, ideally what we're all here for the common good. And, to the current people in Trails, kudos. Thank you for coming out. This is just the right thing to do. It's, at the end of the day, we have an awful lot more to gain than we have to lose. So, thanks everybody. Appreciate it.